everyone, and welcome to Art Encephalon Lectures. Art Encephalon is a research company that employs expertise in neuroscience and computer science with the intent to use a regular computer program to control the brain of a living animal. Art Encephalon has advanced research in this field, and this series of lectures illuminate our belief in this possibility. This is the first in the series of lectures where we begin from what is common knowledge. In this first lecture, we shall be looking at what the brain is made of. So, the computing brain, part 1. What is the brain made of? Right here before us is a picture taken from Johns Hopkins Medicine. You can visit their website for very beautiful pictures of the brain, spinal cord, and further explanations. But it's taken from their website. And here it specifically says that the brain, leaving out the spinal cord, is made of the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. So these three major parts make up what we call the brain. But each of these parts are further divided. And you can keep going around and about the division until you get to where you begin to look for the elementary particles that make up the brain. Now, the brain is made up of glial cells and so on, many other things, but particularly of interest in the brain is a nerve cell called a neuron. A neuron. This is a picture of a neuron. So here we have a neuron that has a soma. The soma is just the cell body, another name for cell body. Again, this picture is taken from Johns Hopkins Medicine. You have these things protruding from the body of the soma here called the dendrites. These are dendrites. So dendrites are where inputs come into the cell body from other cells. So there's a cell body, we have dendrites, and then we have this long projection that goes all the way from the cell body out, which we call an axon. The axon may or may not be myelinated. Myelination means it is wrapped in myelin sheets. Those myelin sheets is what makes the neuron to appear white when you open up a brain. So when you look at a neuron and you see it looking white, just know that it is these myelin sheets that are making them appear white. So the axon can be some inches, it can be several feet long, depending on what kind of axon it is and where the axon is located. At the end of the axon, we have what we call the axon terminals. These are axon terminals. So the signals that are sent from this axon are sent from this nerve are sent along the axon and they terminate at the axon terminal, from which they send impulses to other neurons. So this is an axon. In this video, I'm going to show you how a neuron works. How a neuron works. It's a video taken from Science ABC. You can visit their website for other very cool videos on things that they have talking about neurons and other parts of the brain and science in general. So it's a video put up by Science ABC. Just listen.
Imagine yourself in the middle of a game of catch. A player throws the ball towards you, and as the ball jets closer, you quickly recognize where to position your hand in order to catch the ball safely. Have you ever wondered how your brain is able to so quickly make that decision? How does information flow so fast from your eyes to your brain and back to your hand in order to successfully catch the ball? All information from our environment, in this case, information from the eye about the size and speed of the ball coming towards you, is converted by nerve cells or neurons into electrical signals that are carried to the brain. Similarly, information from our brain to our body, such as an order to move our hand towards the ball's trajectory, is also sent in the form of these signals. These electric signals are called action potentials or nerve impulses. Because these signals are instantaneous, our brain is able to help us quickly detect and respond to things in our environment, both good and bad. It is thanks to the speedy nature of such signals that you can immediately recognize your favorite song, or quickly pull your foot away when you step on a pin. So how do neurons send these signals or fire these action potentials? The human brain contains tens of billions of neurons that are connected to each other. Each neuron has a cell body with several branches. The smaller branches, called dendrites, receive signals that come together, and then the total signal is transmitted through the longest branch, the axon. Similar to how a wire carries electricity from a switch to an electric bulb, the axon carries nerve impulses from a cell body to the next cell. The outer or extracellular surface of a neuron is bathed in a salty solution of positively charged sodium and negatively charged chloride ions. The inner surface has a positively charged potassium ions and proteins that are negatively charged. The negatively charged proteins inside the cell are not balanced by an equal number of positive ions, making the inner surface of the neuron slightly more negative than the outside. This gives rise to an electrical gradient. Furthermore, there is a higher concentration of potassium ions inside, giving rise to a diffusion gradient that forces them to flow outside. Thus, there is both an electrical gradient and a chemical gradient, an electrochemical gradient, forcing ions from inside the cell to go out. Each neuron, when at rest, maintains a voltage difference arising from the electrochemical gradient, just as a battery maintains a certain voltage between its poles. This voltage of approximately -70 millivolts is referred to as the resting potential of a neuron. The cell membrane of the neuron contains ion channels. These are pores formed using proteins that selectively allow certain ions to pass through. Similar to how an airport security guard checks visitors and only allows those with a ticket to proceed to their gates. Some of these channels are special in that they open and close only at a certain voltage. These are called voltage-gated ion channels. Ion channels allow ions in and out, causing the voltage of the cell to move away from its resting potential. At any given time, a neuron keeps receiving small amounts of incoming signals, which results in small fluctuations in the membrane voltage. These are called graded potential, but they are not strong enough to result in the firing of a neuron. A neuron fires or generates a nerve impulse only when the total sum of input signals is large enough to cross a threshold potential of -55 millivolts. This begins because it triggers voltage-gated sodium channels to open. These channels, when opened, cause a rush of many sodium ions into the cell from outside. This causes depolarization of the neuron, or a reversal of charge in its inner surface from negative to positive. The voltage difference continues to become more positive. When the voltage reaches 30 millivolts, it causes voltage-gated potassium channels to open. These channels allow potassium ions to move from inside to outside, slowly repolarizing the cell or restoring the more negative voltage difference. However, the voltage-gated potassium ion channels are much slower to close, causing the voltage to drop below the resting potential of -70 millivolts. This is called hyperpolarization. After a neuron fires in this way, its voltage would be drained, like a rechargeable battery after prolonged use. A reusable battery, however, can be recharged by passing an external current through it. The neurons outsource this job to pumps located on the membrane by spending energy currency called ATP. These pumps act like revolving doors in buildings. They let out more sodium ions from inside the cell, while simultaneously bringing in fewer potassium ions. This brings the neuron back to its resting potential. This entire event of neuron firing follows certain rules. 1. It is an all or nothing event. Nerve impulses are much like digital signals. They occur in the same magnitude, regardless of how strong or weak the stimulus is. However, the threshold voltage must be crossed in order to generate it. 2. They are unidirectional. Once a segment of the membrane becomes depolarized, it passes the signal forward to the next segment. Ion channels, after finishing their job of passing the signal, will pull down their shutters and take a break, becoming inactive for a short while. This is called their refractory period. Therefore, a signal cannot return to them and has no choice but to travel forward to the next segment on the membrane. The process of generating a nerve impulse is fairly quick. However, in certain situations where this is not fast enough, our body uses special neurons with a coating called a myelin sheath to speed up signaling. This coating covers the surface of the axon, while leaving small spots called nodes of Ranvier open. In such covered axons, the signal doesn't have to travel through the entire length of the axon, but only through these gaps, making the signal travel even faster. This type of jumpy signal transmission is called saltatory conduction. In our sense organs, these nerve impulses are caused in response to a sensation, such as odor, taste, touch, sound, or light. For example, in the eye, a nerve impulse is generated in response to light reaching the cells of the retina, which are then passed on through the optic nerve to the part of the brain that processes visual information. The nerve impulse can also have a variety of effects based on where it is sent. When you accidentally step on a pin on the ground, nerves in the spinal cord respond by sending a nerve impulse to your leg muscles, asking them to contract, thereby pulling your leg away from the pin in a fraction of a second. The brain constantly makes sense of the pattern, frequency, and area of origin of the incoming nerve impulses in order to interpret them, and then responds by making appropriate commands to the relevant body parts. In a way, nerve impulses or action potentials are the digital language of the brain itself.
Thank you so much, Science ABC, for that video. Please go to their channel and view other cool videos on things like this that might be of interest to you. So let's continue with our lecture.
Imagine yourself in the
So, we want to look at the computer side of logic. So let's look at the computer side of logic. So you will discover that logic gates are the things that make computers work. Remember, in this lecture, what we want to do is we want to look at the brain, then we look at computers, and then we see the similarities and differences between them and how a computer can be used to control a brain. So first we need to understand what a brain is made of, what a computer is made of, and then look at the similarity and see how we can make one like the computer to operate a brain. So today we're going to look at the basic building block of a computer. A computer is just an electronic device that is able to accept data and instruction in a particular format, process it, and generate output also in a particular format with minimal human intervention. Now, a computer is made up of electronic circuits, which we call logic gates. Those logic gates could be AND gates, OR gates, NOR gates. These gates are what makes a computer work. Each of these gates are built from currently transistors. Back in the days, we used to use vacuum tubes and so many other things that will relay and all that. But currently, we use transistors, right? But let's don't go into the level of transistors. Let's look at logic gates, how they're built. So I'm going to play you another video that talks about logic gates. Logic gates. It's a YouTube video, very nice video, and it tells you a lot about how computer logic works, and then from there we'll take it on from it. Just watch this video.
Inside your computer are billions of units called transistors. These transistors serve a variety of purposes, but they commonly act as a sort of very small light switch. Each switch can be turned on or turned off. Computer scientists will often represent a switch that's turned on with the number 1, and a switch that's turned off with the number 0. These zeros and ones form a number system called binary, and it's the fundamental language of computers. From just these zeros and ones, we end up with computers that can perform calculations, create documents, view images, browse the web, and more. How does that happen? In this series, we'll explore the foundations of computer logic, starting from the fundamentals and building our way to more and more sophisticated systems. Using these switches, our computers can store information. Each switch stores a single bit of information, a 0 or a 1. But computers don't just store information, they process it, transforming inputs into outputs. That's where logic gates come in. Logic gates are the building blocks of computer circuits. They accept input and produce output according to a set of logical rules. One of the simplest logic gates is the NOT gate, represented graphically here. The NOT gate takes a single input, either a 0 or a 1, and inverts it, so that the output is the opposite of whatever the input is. If the input is a 1, then the NOT gate outputs a 0. If the input is a 0, then the NOT gate outputs a 1. To represent the logical rule this gate obeys, we can draw a truth table, which is just a way of writing down the rules for some logical formula. This table says that if the input is 0, then the output is 1, and if the input is 1, the output is 0. Often, though, our computers need to be able to perform calculations not just on a single bit of information, but on multiple bits of information. The AND gate, shown here for example, is a logic gate that takes 2 inputs instead of 1. Let's call these 2 inputs A and B. As the name might suggest, the AND gate will output a 1 when both A and B are 1s. But in all other cases, AND will output a 0. We can construct a truth table here too. This truth table is a bit bigger, since with 2 inputs there are more possibilities to consider. If A and B are 0, the output is 0. If A is 0 and B is 1, the output is 0. If A is 1 and B is 0, the output is still 0, and only when both A and B are 1s is the output a 1. The OR gate, meanwhile, is also a logic gate that takes 2 inputs. This gate outputs a 1 when A is a 1, or when B is a 1. So if both inputs are 0, the OR gate outputs a 0. But if either of the inputs is a 1, or both inputs are a 1, then the output of the OR gate is also going to be a 1. These logic gates on their own follow fairly simple rules, but they can combine with each other to form more complex calculations. Imagine what would happen if, for example, we took 2 inputs, passed them into an AND gate, and then passed that output into a NOT gate. What would happen? If both inputs are 0, the AND gate will output a 0, and the NOT will turn that 0 into a 1. If only one of the inputs is a 0, nothing changes. But if both inputs are 1, the AND gate will output a 1, and the NOT will turn that 1 into a 0. In other words, this circuit appears to do the opposite of whatever the AND gate on its own would do. It turns out that inverting the result of an AND calculation is such a common operation that it has its own logic gate, the NAND gate. This gate is equivalent to an AND followed by a NOT. So if the AND truth table looks like this, then the NAND truth table is identical, except all of the outputs are inverted. Whenever AND would output a 0, NAND outputs a 1. Whenever AND would output a 1, NAND outputs a 0. As you might guess, if there's a logic gate to take the opposite of an AND gate, there is also a logic gate that takes the opposite of an OR gate. This is the NOR gate. When both inputs are 0, OR would normally output a 0 too, so the NOR gate will flip that and output a 1. In all other cases, at least one of the inputs is 1, so OR would output a 1, and so the NOR gate will output a 0 instead. Let's now use these gates to solve a sample problem. Given 2 inputs A and B, we'd like to calculate whether exactly one of them is a 1. Well, what does it mean logically for exactly one of these 2 inputs to be a 1? Well, it means that either A or B must be a 1, but it also means they can't both be a 1. So logically, we might represent this as A or B, and not A and B, to mean that one of the 2 must be a 1, but both can't be a 1. We could create a circuit to perform this calculation too, but this circuit is starting to look fairly complex. So once again, there's a logic gate to solve this problem precisely. The exclusive OR gate outputs a 1 when exactly one of its inputs is a 1. So if only A is 1, or only B is 1, then the output of exclusive OR is 1. But otherwise, if both inputs have the same value, both zeros or both 1s, then the output is 0. And just for completeness sake, there's also a gate for inverting the exclusive OR gate, the exclusive NOR gate. This gate does the opposite of what exclusive OR does. While exclusive OR will output a 1 when the two inputs are different from each other, exclusive NOR will output a 1 when the two inputs are the same, both zeros or both ones. These logical gates, NOT, AND, OR, NAND, NOR, exclusive OR, and exclusive NOR, make up the foundation of computation in computers. By combining just these few logical gates, each of which obeys a relatively simple logical rule, we can construct computers that can represent all of the data and perform all of the complex calculations that our computers do every day.
Thank you so much for that video. So we're going to continue our class now. The video, like we said, looked at logic gates, OR gates, NOR gates, AND gates, exclusive OR gates, and these are the building blocks of computers. Just as neurons are the building blocks of every logic in the brain. And I will tell you now that there are similarities between them, between a gate and a neuron. Most times, a neuron will express a gate or logic that is carried out by a combination of gates. And we're going to look at that in this lecture as we go on.
Inside your computer.
So what we've said is that over here is a neuron. Again, look at the soma, look at the dendrites, the axon, and the axon terminal. So this is a neuron. This neuron is similar to these logic gates. The AND, the NAND, the exclusive OR, the NOT, the NOR, the OR gates. So this neuron can express this logic, or a combination of this neuron can express a combination of this logic, or a combination of this logic can express a neuron. And we're going to see that in this lecture, or this series of lectures as we go on. So the nervous system consists of neurons, like we said, and a computer system consists of logic gates. Now, neurons are either firing an action potential or they are not. There are only two states that a neuron can be. It's either firing an action potential or it is not firing an action potential. On the side of the computer, the logic gate is either outputting a high voltage, which we call a 1, or a low voltage, which we call a 0. So, in the neuron, since there are only two possible states the output can be, it's either firing or not firing, the neuron can be thought of as exhibiting binary logic of firing 1 and not firing 0. Just as we have in logic gates high voltage 1 or low voltage 0. So, again, I am going to be drawing a neuron. This is just a caricature representation of a neuron, but what I'm trying to do is to show you this neuron that is beautifully shown here in this picture. I'm just trying to tell you that sometimes when I draw, I might represent it like this, or I might even take away the axons, these axons you see here, and just show the cell body, and then take out the dendrite, show you the cell body and then the axon and the axon terminal. But whenever you see me draw this, I'm trying to represent a neuron, all right? And I would use the same symbols we use for logic gates as we go on in this lecture. So, logic gates. 0 means low voltage. 1 means high voltage. For neurons, not firing, when a neuron is not firing, we say it's 0. And when it is firing, we say it is a 1. Thank you.